Grateful to be here, and I'm hoping that you've gained something really valuable from our session today. So as Nancy mentioned, I'm just going to talk to you about the READI training and then give you a little snippet of what you could possibly learn through the training or what we've done in the past with other communities and employers. So I'd like to start by opening the session by first acknowledging that RDN's physical office is located on Amiskwaciwa-Skaken, also known as Beaver Hills House or Edmonton. We are located on the traditional territories of Métis Nation Districts 9 and 10. And I'd like to thank our hosts, the Cree, the Blackfoot, the Métis, the Dene, the Nakota Sioux, and many others whose traditional lands we stand upon today. As an organization, RDN acknowledges the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island and respects the histories, languages, and cultures of the First Nations, Métis, and the First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant communities today. So thank you for the introduction, Nancy. As mentioned, my name is Soheila Homayed. I'm the program manager for the Rural Immigration Initiative at RDN. And for those who don't know who RDN is, just very briefly, we're a nonprofit organization that works to support the sustainability of rural communities across Canada. So we have four major pillars. We create innovative tools and resources. We provide expertise and capacity building, so workshops and trainings like today. We also help to advocate and amplify that rural voice, and we help communities, organizations, and accessing funding. And at our organization, we have four major pillars. So we support with housing development, we address homelessness and houselessness initiatives, we do integration and retention of newcomers in rural communities, and we also do community development as well. So I just wanted to start with this slide, and I'm wondering if anyone has any idea on the percentage of population growth in Canada and the percentage of labor force growth in Canada last year that was accounted for by immigration. Does anyone have any ideas? Feel free to use the chat or unmute your microphone. Awesome. We have a brave soul. Thank you, DJ. 80% of population growth. Okay, great answer. Okay, just for the sake of time, I can move forward. It's okay. So actually, last year, according to IRCC, immigration accounted for 98% of population growth in the country and 100% of our labor force growth. And the reason why I really like to share this statistic is because I think everyone on the call here can agree that, especially through the economic development lens, immigration is really changing our workforces, and it's important that we acknowledge that newcomers are coming to play a huge role in not only our population growth, but in supporting our rural communities and our labor force. And that's, essentially why we created this program and why I'm here to talk to you today. And I wanted to just mention that, there's always a why to every project. Why did we start doing training? Why was the Rural Immigration Initiative started? And we really actually started in 2019 as a response to the emerging needs that rural communities were having. So we started doing training with service providers and municipalities in these rural communities who were beginning to welcome newcomers. But then we noticed a major gap, and that gap was employers. Employers play a pivotal role in the lives of newcomers by helping them integrate both into the workplace and the community, and also helping them establish that sense of belongingness that will lead to retention in the long term of employees, but also members of your community. So we created this training because employers really are that heart. They support with the attraction, the retention, and the settlement of newcomers in rural communities. And by creating that sense of belongingness, they're going to support people in wanting to stay and grow in our small towns. So that's really why the READI training was born, because we noticed that gap and we wanted to support employers who are beginning their process of hiring newcomer talent. So there's three main goals to the READI training. The first, as I mentioned, is to support that attraction and retention piece of employers in rural workforces, but also in rural communities. They go hand in hand. When workers feel supported and valued in the workplace, they're going to want to stay in our communities for the long term. We also wanted to help employers identify and address the gaps and challenges that they were experiencing in welcoming newcomers, maybe for the first time, or welcoming a large number of newcomers to their workforce. And then we wanted to create this training to help support more welcoming, inclusive organizations that will then translate to more welcoming and inclusive communities. So the reason why I'm presenting today and why Nancy said this was so timely is because the READI program is actually fully funded until the end of June. So it began in 2022, and it's really actually grown into my passion project, but it was funded originally by the Government of Alberta's Settlement Integration and Language Program, and then it was picked up by Prairies Canada last year because we were noticing through the beginning of the Rural Renewal Stream and the Rural Entrepreneur Stream, employers still needed training and they needed support to be able to welcome newcomers. So Prairies Can is funding this until the end of June. It's completely free. So we could do virtual trainings, or we could host lunch and learns like this for your organization or your community. We can do in-person workshops or community engagement. So if you're thinking your multiple employers in your community could benefit from this, we could do a half-day session or a 3-hour session in person and get everyone together. And also the best part about this is it's customizable. So if you let me know your needs, for example, if you wanted to do some EDI training or anti-discrimination training, I can customize the content to meet those needs and also the length. So if you were hoping for an hour workshop or a 3-hour workshop, we can make that work within your schedule. Because we know employers are incredibly busy and your time is valuable. So we want to make sure you get the most out of the session. So that's essentially why I'm here, is to let you know this free resource that's available, and please use it. We have a lot of great content, and I'll go through some of it as well. But I also wanted to mention that we did publish a toolkit with the training, the READI toolkit, and this has all of our training materials available, case studies from employers, lessons learned from our previous engagement sessions, and sample policies and frameworks that employers can implement in their organizations. This is available online. It's free for any employer, but also we have actually recently printed the hard copy. So we could also send it to you as well if you were hoping for a hard copy version of the training. So with that, I'm going to show you some potential topics that we could work with you or your community to support. And I wanted to start with the importance of EDI. And, I think there's been a lot of talk lately in the media and through different organizations about why EDI is important. A lot of organizations are choosing not to follow EDI, and I think that's a mistake. And this training will talk about why, you should have EDI initiatives in your organization. And it really starts with 3 main points. So the first being, equity. And equity does not mean that people get a leg up. It really means that you're removing barriers and opportunities for folks so that they can actually have fair access to resources and opportunities and decision making. And essentially, it levels the playing field. It doesn't give anyone a leg up. And I think there's a huge misconception about equity that needs to be addressed, and that could be done through this training. The second is diversity. Of course, that means, to be able to embrace difference, encourage representation of people from different backgrounds, identities, and perspectives. And, that goes just beyond newcomers. It could be people from all walks of life. It also helps to enrich communities and organizations by providing, a wide range of experiences and viewpoints that can then lead to a greater return on investment in your organization. And thirdly, promotes that inclusivity and that sense of belongingness. And everyone, regardless of where you're from, where you want to go, you need to feel that sense of belongingness and feel included to want to stay and work in your organization or in your community. And, inclusion just really fosters that welcoming environment where everyone can feel safe, heard, and respected. So really by embedding these principles into your organization or in your greater community, we're building places where people feel safe and welcomed. And I think that's what needs to be stressed the most when talking about EDI, is the importance of that, and for people to be able to contribute meaningfully to the workplace and the community. So other aspects that we talk about through the training, first and foremost, as I mentioned, employers are really the heart of bringing newcomers to our communities and helping them stay. And so they need to understand what those settlement needs are beyond just the workplace. So, especially in rural communities, the capacity to support newcomers is going to look different, and there's going to be a greater focus on meeting those initial settlement needs. So what I mean by that is when newcomers first arrive, they're going to need language support. Knowing English is a survival skill, and that will be kind of the number one thing that newcomers are trying to establish when they move to your community. They also will require that cultural orientation. So, beyond just acclimatization to the weather, they're going to need to adjust to diet, social relationships, new environments, the way of being in not only Canada, but also in your small town. Social networking opportunities as well. Especially in more remote places, isolation is really challenging and can be a huge setback for someone trying to integrate or settle. So creating those social networking opportunities are really important. And then again, through that rural lens, transportation, both within and between communities, essential. Temporary housing. So when newcomers first arrive, they're going to want somewhere to temporarily stay, but then that will transition to more long-term housing. Of course, they're going to need healthcare, understanding of the Canadian school system or the law system as well. And then they'll need support with their documents, whether that be, work-related or immigration-related. Those are kind of those first needs that someone will have when they move to your community or your workplace. And as an employer, you should have an understanding of, where your workers are at in terms of meeting those needs, because that's going to help them be more productive in the workplace and will eventually, diminish any turnover that you may have from hiring newcomer staff. So other barriers that you're going to learn about through the training are the 6 Cs. And these are kind of, once the settlement needs are done, this is what you should look for in supporting employees or people to the community. First is color. So we know that, in more rural remote places, there's a lack of diversity, and that can create a lot of barriers in, being welcomed to a new community. Second is cultural confusion. So this often happens when newcomers have a different expectation of what life in Canada would be like. And then once they arrive, they might realize it's not at all what they thought. It's more expensive, they're not able to find resources, and it's navigating those challenges. And then also balancing, knowing and practicing your own culture and trying to acclimatize to a new culture and fit in and gain aspects from, Canada and trying to navigate that balance between culture, which can be confusing. Climate, of course, and I don't just mean, the winter, I mean the small things that we might not think about, like iron deficiencies or vitamin deficiencies that come with the winter time. Learning how to drive in winter. I know when I moved to Alberta from Ontario, I found it different to drive on the roads in the winter here. I don't know if there's something different being used on the roads, but I actually found it harder to drive here in the winter than in Ontario. So just those small things that we might not think about, especially, seasonal depression, that mental health piece, I think that can catch a lot of people off guard. Computers, we've seen this a lot actually with Ukrainian newcomers and a lot of the older newcomers. Just having those skills to be able to access services online that are often only offered in rural communities. And then, of course, if you live in a remote area, the internet bandwidth, not having access to internet, things like that. Then the connection and the communication piece, and those really play on those retention factors. Connection, not being able to converse with people, that's incredibly frustrating, especially when you're moving to a new town, you're trying to figure out the lay of the land. Not being able to communicate can further, promote isolation, missed opportunities, frustration. And then on the other piece, the connection piece, newcomers need to feel a sense of connection, whether that be in the workplace, a community, to your neighbors. So that could be a huge barrier as well that they experience. Okay. Other challenges, I'm going to go through this really quickly, that we'll talk about, and then practical solutions through the training. So for example, employment challenges, finding meaningful employment and opportunities to grow, and that means beyond those survival jobs. A huge barrier is actually accessing language supports beyond beginner's English. So a lot of language courses offer just beginner's English. And if you're a newcomer hoping to grow in your career or any opportunities to thrive, you're going to need more than just beginner's English. And having those opportunities in those classes are hard to come by. Cultural differences as well. That plays a huge barrier in, not only trying to fit into a new community and a new culture, but also a workplace. Every workplace has their own culture, so they're going to need that integration experience and some time to get adjusted. And then the pushback from workforce or other colleagues. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but this is a huge challenge in a lot of rural workplaces that we're seeing. Housing challenges, of course, we know these are challenges, but specific to newcomers, it's important to talk about the household size and makeup. So this is often seen in rural communities where there's not a lot of housing diversity. We're seeing newcomer families come in with a significant number of family members or pets, and it's often more challenging in rural communities to find housing to meet those needs. I also wanted to mention the importance of the reference and required documentation. So this really plays on landlords and housing providers, but there's going to need to be a better solution on providing those necessary employer references or proof of income for rental application processes. Because if you're coming as an international student or a refugee, you're not going to have those documents. So what's the solution, and how can we better support landlords in creating innovative practices to get those references outside of the standard norms? Rental deposits as well. Some newcomers might not have that large sum of money to put a first month's rent, including rental deposits. So things like that need to be discussed as well. And then those cultural differences surrounding real estate and renting and tenancy. So we often found this with Ukrainian newcomers coming, that their idea of tenancy and the laws required to be a good tenant in Canada were vastly different than in Ukraine. So it's talking through those cultural differences and things like that that you might not normally think about, especially as a landlord if you're not used to housing newcomers. That could be a challenge. Transportation, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I think everyone understands the challenges that transportation can often offer in our communities. And then something I wanted to highlight that we talk about very often in the training, it dives into a little bit about the discrimination that newcomers experience, and then provides resources and an understanding of how to conquer this discrimination through an individual lens or an organizational lens. And just something that I really wanted to highlight, last year, Environics did a study, and it said that 58% of Canadians said that there's too much immigration in Canada. And I believe that same study was done about 10 years ago. And the result was that there wasn't enough immigration in Canada. So we're really seeing this negative rhetoric towards newcomers coming in, and it's affecting their ability to integrate and want to stay in our communities. It was also reported that the areas that they were discriminated the most against were their race and color, which oftentimes, if you're in a small town and there's not a lot of people from your same race or who are minorities, that can be a challenge. Ethnicity or culture were also discriminated against, and then language, especially with accents. And then the most common situations were first and foremost at work or when applying for a job. So part of the READI training could be looking at your organizational practices and doing some unconscious bias training about how to hire without having that bias lens. Also at a store in a business, so public places, or using public areas like transportation or community services. I also mentioned the pushback from workforce, and this is huge and something that I've really been noticing a lot when working with employers. So recently I did a workshop in Southern Alberta with an employer who had hired 100 newcomer staff to their organization. That was 100 positions that they were able to fill using immigration, and they were so excited. They created a whole orientation week. There was a lot of time and resources put into this, but what they hadn't realized was that there was a lot of negative pushback from their current workforce, of people saying, newcomers are coming and taking all of our jobs, they're dominating our workforce. There was a lot of that. And so the employer hired us to come in and work through that with their senior leadership team and talk about what they can do. So, ways that we can do that through this training. Some ideas we have is talking about those misconceptions. with facts and information. So indeed, like newcomers were not coming in and taking these jobs. They were open and vacant positions for years that this company was trying to fill in this area that they were not able to. Promoting workplace training and cultural competency. So if you're an employer hiring a large number of newcomers or you're part of the rural renewal stream, I 100% recommend you do training with all your staff. Some kind of training so they can get on board and you can kind of evaluate where your workforce is at. Also, something that's been really important and also very valuable is to showcase success stories of newcomers who have come to your workplace or your community and who have done really great things to kind of change that negative view towards immigration. And then creating opportunities for employees to connect and build relationships. So, storytelling is an incredibly effective tool. Getting to know someone on a personal basis, understanding their history, why they wanted to come to Canada, that can help with a lot of that pushback as well. Other trainings or topics that we talk about is intercultural communication. So this can often lead to problems in the workplace or perceived performance issues. So we talk and we go through these best practices on what you can do as an employer. So for example, being aware of different communication styles, and that goes beyond just hiring newcomers. People communicate differently, using inclusive and simple language, things like that, encourage active listening, and then offer language supports or translations where necessary. Some other promising practices that we dive into, and that I wanted to show you today, to become more welcoming and inclusive as an employer. So firstly, targeted, structured onboarding. So onboarding for a newcomer employee should look different than someone you hired from Canada. There's multiple reasons for this, but your onboarding should include different topics such as workplace culture, cultural orientation, so the norms of your workplace, where you put your lunch bag during lunchtime. If there's any unspoken rules about using the microwave, the smoker section, arriving to work at 8:45 so you can start at 9, not arriving at 9 and starting at 9:15. So being very clear about that. Talking about work-life balance, talking about mental health. So these are all things that you can do in your onboarding that will support the integration of your newcomer employees. We also talk about mentorship models, and they're incredibly important for the integration experience. So one-on-one mentorships, peer-to-peer mentorships, or group mentorships, and then doing those workplace policies to support inclusion. So having the policy is part one, but part two is using the policy and going through it annually or biannually and making sure it's working. So we'll go through these more in-depthly in the training, but I just wanted to highlight them for you today. Other promising practices. So I always love to talk about leadership. So leadership is really the key to a welcoming and inclusive community or organization. Everything is top down. If your leadership team is really positive and accepting and promoting diversity, that will trickle down towards other staff. So doing promising practices like those workshops on unconscious bias, really important, because often we have these biases, or we stereotype, or we say microaggressions, and we don't really realize that we're doing that, and that can reflect on your whole organization. So having that awareness is really important, especially at that senior leadership level. Again, cultural competency training, encouraging diverse leadership representation. So taking a look at your board or your senior leadership team and seeing where you might be able to promote someone to level that playing field and have a diverse representation. Recognizing and celebrating diversity, identifying the privilege that you have, and then using that privilege to create change in your organization, and then being able to speak up and take action. We also go through some interesting and innovative tools. So this municipal evaluation tool was done by AOMA, now known as Alberta Municipalities, but it's a way for you to measure the inclusion level of your organization or your community. And it will give you a result on kind of where you fall from here. And this could be a really good starting point for you to just kind of take a step back and say, okay, here's where we currently are, and that will help you in fostering better goals on where you want to be or what you want your organization to look like in 5 years or 10 years. So using tools like this to help assess your organization are also really important. We also talk about hiring for cultural competency. So you can actually hire staff that will help create a more diverse and inclusive workplace. So that could look like talking about it through the hiring process. So for example, through your applications, looking for evidence that someone has already done this training or has worked with the diverse clients in the past. It could look like asking direct questions to the candidate to gauge their experience, talking to their references, or doing knowledge testing and put them in scenarios to see how they would respond in situations where they have to work with someone from a different culture or if there's a language barrier. So that can help you with your future organizational goals for your community as well. And then we talk about, which is probably, I would say, the most favorite part of the training is success stories. So employers who have done things really great. And I just wanted to highlight this one employer. And I'm just going to play a really quick video because I actually had the opportunity to support these 6 welders in integrating to Sudbury and into the workplace. And the federal government actually did a video about it. So I'm just going to quickly play it. It's only 2 minutes, but it'll really highlight the importance of supporting workforce through immigration.
Carrier was founded in 1964 by Armin Carrier and has been a family-owned business since then. At Carrier, we design and build mining equipment for a variety of mining customers. Trucks that weigh upwards of 400 tons. We manufacture these specifically for hard rock mining. Many people don't know this, but Sudbury is the mining capital of the world, and being in Sudbury allowed us to do that type of work. Carrier's grown exponentially over the years, but we found that we were lacking in tradespeople and that growth was going to plateau unless we found tradespeople to meet the needs of our products. Some of the campaigns that we developed involved trade shows, job fairs, multiple types of advertising campaigns. We found them not to be successful, so we decided to look abroad for employees.
I started to work as a welder in Mexico around 10 years ago. When I came here, it's very nice to have people interest in your knowledge or the experience that you can have. And I really like to be the one who can teach someone else to make his job easier. My family is very excited because they never seen the snow before. I come from a big city in Mexico. Here, the quiet lifestyle, something that I fell in love. It's very nice. The people like me who decide to move to another country is because we have a lot of people behind us. In this case, my family. So I'm doing this just for them.
The impacts were just about immediate that we found with the new workers that we've hired from overseas. They bring a new level of enthusiasm, they're interested in participating, they're energetic, they're ambitious, and they bring a real good work ethic to the place. They've augmented our staff, and we've been able to develop new markets and develop even better products. The most rewarding part of this whole process is seeing the newcomers and their families in Sudbury and seeing that they have a future that they can build for themselves here, and they become part of the family.
So as I mentioned, I had the opportunity to work with Carrier and help integrate all of those employees into not only Carrier, but also in Sudbury. And I just wanted to mention that the gentleman in the video who was speaking, when he first came to Canada, he could barely say probably 5 words in English. And he worked really hard on his language skills for him to be able to narrate that video. So it's always so nice to see. But I will let you know that every single one of those workers are still in Sudbury. They've all brought their families now. 3 of them were promoted to managers. They're doing really well. Their families have come, they're in the school system, their partners are working, and they've really contributed to the community. So we go over that, you know, what they did to be successful, some best practices that they did that other employers could adopt to be successful as well. So it's a really great story, and I'm really proud that, you know, all those workers are still there and they're still thriving in Sudbury. And it's a good example of how a community can come together to support newcomers. So with that, I'm just going to open the floor to any questions. But, in terms of next steps, if if you are a rural renewal community and you think that employers should have this training, or if you yourself would like me to come to your workforce and do some training with your staff or your senior leadership team, please let me know. As I mentioned, it could be virtual or in person. And again, it's free until the end of June. So I really urge you to take this. Outside of June, it will be done on like a fee-for-service basis, but we still have this training offering through RDN. And then if you're going to EDA, we'll be presenting, me and a couple of my colleagues, on how to bridge the divide between social and economic development to foster community prosperity. So if you're attending the conference, feel free to come to our session. And with that, that's it from me. So I appreciate your time